Is Anthony Joshua still pay-per-view worthy? Well, ultimately, whether or not a fight is worth paying for comes down to the value that you place on it as an individual. For example, a lot of people paid to watch KSI's last fight. Regardless of what you or I thought about that event, evidently, there were lots of people who were interested enough to actually pay for it. One man's trash is another man's treasure, right? I've purchased most of the major pay-per-views on BT Sport, Sky, and even ITV over the past few years. I paid for all 3 Fury Wilder fights. I bought all of Dylan White's pay-per-views, and I bought most of AJ's pay-per-views. But I would not pay for AJ versus Arreola, Wallin, Washington, or even Dylan White. And there's nothing wrong with those fights, by the way. AJ's coming off back-to-back defeats, so obviously he needs to be stepped down a few levels. But I just don't value those fights highly enough from an entertainment perspective to want to pay for them. He's coming off 2 losses, and even prior to that, his most recent wins were unconvincing from my perspective. He's looked like damaged goods psychologically ever since Ruiz stopped him. He chose to stand off and give Alexander Usyk all the space he needed to soundly outbox him in their first fight. And rather than take it to him in the rematch, he decided to stand off once again. There's obviously some kind of mental obstacle there that he's struggling to overcome. Now, despite AJ's fall from grace, Eddie Hearn has seemed to indicate that all his fights moving forward will still be on pay-per-view. When DAZN first launched in the UK and America, it was sold to us as the pay-per-view killer. But then the goalposts were moved, and we were told that DAZN would be doing the occasional pay-per-view, but only for mega fights. Since then, the goalposts have been moved even further to the point where pay-per-views are becoming a regular occurrence on DAZN. Now, I fully appreciate the fact that the unforeseen economic turmoil this past 2.5 years has forced a lot of businesses to change the way they operate. But to go from saying pay-per-views would be strictly reserved for mega fights to then putting every single Anthony Joshua fight on pay-per-view, irrespective of who the opponent is, that doesn't sit right with me. I just don't see AJ as a premier fighter at this point. He's got no belts. He's lost 3 of his last 5 fights, and even the 2 wins he had were unconvincing. For me, he needs to redeem himself with some major wins before I'd put him in that premier category again. I would not pay to watch an AJ fight at this point unless it was a really exciting, genuine 50-50 or a fight in which he was the underdog. Other than that, nah. But that's just me. If enough of you guys feel the opposite and proceed to buy all his pay-per-views regardless, then I guess DAZN would be vindicated for charging a premium after all. It's supply and demand, right? And that's assuming DAZN actually do put his next fight on pay-per-view. I'm just going off what Eddie Hearn has seemed to indicate. I'm not saying they definitely will. I'm just saying hypothetically, if they did, it wouldn't be something I'd be willing to pay for. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Give me yours in the comments.